Adding the national identity to it doesn't add any value. Have your company and your product stand for a human emotion. It's a secret for being successful in the future. Think human, act humane.
Welcome to YanaTV, and today with us we have Fredrik Härén, who is a really sought-after speaker. He has been invited to more than 60 countries, and Fredrik is an author of 9 books, with One World, One Company being his latest. And that's actually a super book, guys. I really love it, and that's why I wanted to talk to you about it today.
Yes, thank you.
So, Fredrik, in your book, you talk a lot about the global mindset. So what is the global mindset?
Well, this is a business book, so it's all about how to basically think about how you run your company. And the idea here is around running what I call a TGC, a truly global company. And that doesn't necessarily mean that you have to be a big global company. So it's about the mindset of how you identify the company that you're running or owning, right? So in the book, it's mostly big global companies that I have interviewed, because usually they've come further, right? But
So it's the secret of success.
It's a secret for being successful in the future. Right now, you can still be very successful running a nationalistic company. And of course, you will always be able to run a nationalistic company. But my point is, if you want to be more successful, you should disconnect your company from your country of origin and focus it more around the values that you as an entrepreneur or the company, or the values that the company stands for, which should not be the country's value. So let me explain, right? For example, I'm Swedish, right? So the first 10 years, I would look at myself as being a Swedish speaker. I would define myself as being a Swedish speaker, which meant I, for some weird coincidence, only spoke in Sweden, or maybe Norway and Finland, once in UK or something like this, right? But then I moved to Asia. I lived in China for a while, and then I moved to Singapore. Now, when I moved to Singapore, I said, I'm not going to be a Singaporean speaker. I'm just going to be a speaker. Not necessarily a global speaker, which I turned out to be, but I'm just going to define myself as a speaker, not a Swedish speaker. Because adding the national identity to it doesn't add any value anymore. Actually, it adds something that is, it dilutes value for many reasons. So one reason is that if you put a national identity on your company, you will frame it around that country. You limit the way you're thinking. And you're also not in charge of what the brand stands for, because you are not in charge of what people think of Russia or what people think of Sweden. So there are two disadvantages.
You don't think about Russia as this at all.
Yeah, exactly. Well, I think you and I are very similar.
Yes.
And people think like, oh, so you're anti-nationalistic. No, I'm not anti-nationalistic. What I'm doing is I'm adding another layer on top of nationalistic, right? So by saying I'm a speaker instead of a Swedish speaker, my world just opened up. So when I was a Swedish speaker, I've spoken maybe in 10 countries. When I reframed my mindset and said I'm going to be a speaker, then I went from 10 countries to more than 60 different countries in less than 10 years, right? And the same with my books. I was a Swedish author. I would publish my book in Swedish and I would sell them in Sweden. I reframed my mindset and I'm saying I'm going to be an author. And now my books are in 15 different languages and I've sold them to more than 60 different countries. It's all about reframing your mindset, right? And some companies are doing that. So what I use a great example, because cars are very much connected to countries, right? You have German cars, you have American cars, you have Japanese cars, Russian cars.
Probably you wouldn't know any, I do.
But people think that it's a good thing to connect your car brand to a national brand, because that's what people used to do, right? The 20th century was all about nations and the companies connected to those nations. And the 21st century, the companies have disconnected themselves from countries and become something else.
So they're connected to what?
Exactly. So there's only one successful car brand launched in the 21st century from scratch, which is Tesla, which is, by the way, one of the most hyped car brand, the most respected car brands in the world, which is amazing considering that it's so young, right? But Tesla doesn't promote itself as being an American car or a South African car, because he's from South Africa. It defines itself as being an electric car. So they define their car brand based on what kind of car it is, not what kind of country the car happened to be made in. And that's a huge difference. And the companies started in the 21st century are much more thinking like this, because people in the 21st century are much more thinking like this.
So if you want to succeed in the business in the 21st century as a business owner, you should really think for your product, the characteristics of your product. It should be something that speaks to your audience worldwide.
Yes, and
so
you should look
choose
at
something.
You should look at what is our core values.
Yeah,
what
it's like
do
an
we
X
stand
factor
for?
also.
Yeah, so for example, Coca-Cola used to be American, and we would even push that it wasn't. But Coca-Cola is not about America anymore. Coca-Cola is about happiness.
Yes.
Right? And if it's a Filipino Coca-Cola ad, it's all about the domestic helper coming home to a party, eating lechon and drinking Coke, right? So it's very low, but then people say, oh, you should localize it. No, it's different. The idea is that you should try to have your company and your product stand for a human emotion. So I actually used the example of Stolichnaya vodka not in my book, but in my speeches.
Okay. So Russian vodka. Yes.
Well, this is actually a good example. I'll use this example because people think Stolichnaya is a Russian vodka, but it's not. It's a Maltese vodka. The company is based in Malta. It's owned by a Russian who doesn't live in Russia, and you cannot buy Stolichnaya vodka in Russia because there's a trademark feud with the Russian government. And technically, it's not made in Russia. It's made in Riga. It used to be made in the Soviet Union. The Soviet Union fell apart, and now the factory is outside Russia. But Stolichnaya said, we are not going to be a Russian vodka. We are going to be, instead of standing for a location, we're going to stand for human emotion. So they said, we are going to be the inspiring creative vodka. So if you are an inspiring creative person, you will drink Stolichnaya. Now they had a problem because the creative people in the restaurant industry, in trendy nightclubs in Rio de Janeiro or in San Francisco are gay, homosexuals. And you know what happened in Russia? Big anti-gay demonstrations.
So they wouldn't buy it to support because they think it's
so
Russia.
Now they have these huge demonstrations in bars in San Francisco and New York, boycott Russian vodka, boycott Russia, boycott Stolichnaya. And Stolichnaya said, no, we're not a Russian vodka. We are creative vodka for creative people. So see, there's two lessons there. Lesson number one is very dangerous to connect yourself to a country, but suddenly the image of that country might change and so your product is being hurt. But second of all, if you're successful to connect your brand to a human emotion, that human emotion will not change. Even if it's happiness or creativity or safety or honesty or something like that, that's a human thing. Everyone can like that. Even if you're a Chinese, for example, Bentley cars. Everyone says that Bentley is a British car. They should promote their Britishness. But for me, Bentley is not about Britain. Bentley is about being a gentleman, being a successful sport. It's a luxury car and a performance car. It's about the sporty, successful, daredevil gentleman, right? But you can have a Chinese gentleman. You can have a Saudi Arabian gentleman and you can have a South American gentleman because they all stand for something. Being a gentleman stands for something. You don't have to add British to it. And that would make the brand much stronger because a Dubai gentleman would rather be a gentleman than a British gentleman. So this mindset, so people say, it used to be, think global, act local. Right? That's the mantra of the 1980s and 1990s. But my point is that the world has changed. And now the new mantra should be think human, act humane. Okay? Think human,
I love
act
it.
humane.
Think human, act humane.
If you do that, suddenly you are thinking not how can I sell this on this market, or you're selling how can I sell this to this to my customers, regardless of where they are and regardless of where they live, why should a passport decide how you sell your market, sell your product or market your product, or how you look at your customer? There are a million things that are more important than the customer's passport when you sell to him. And if you reframe your mindset like that, you're much better positioned to how the world will look in the future. Because when I was growing up in Sweden, I'm 50 years old, everyone saw the same advertisements. Everyone saw the same TV show. Everyone, looked the same. Everyone was the same. Everyone read the same newspaper and everyone talked about the same stories. Today, the next generation, they will look at different ads because Google will identify them based on what they like, not necessarily where they live. They will look at different TV shows because they will watch it on YouTube. They have friends all over the place. When they connect with people on a trip and they will be friends with them and they become individuals. Like, this is who I am. This is my interest. And national identity is becoming weaker because the other identities that we have are becoming stronger.
Absolutely. Well, also now many go to international schools.
Well,
so if children, that's part of that. If you grew up with, I don't know, in our family, our son goes to the boarding school this year and they have children from 60 countries.
Yes, and that's always been the case, and it's a small percentage of kids that do that. On the other hand, even on that level or a smaller level, before, if you meet someone on a trip, you would lose contact after you came home. But if you meet someone now, you will still be friends on Facebook. And now I have friends all over the world on my Facebook page. People I've met, and I keep in contact with them. So if something happens in Sri Lanka, I can email my friend in Sri Lanka, say, hey, what's going on in Sri Lanka or in Bangladesh or wherever they are. So I get a much stronger affinity to other parts of the world, and my national identity becomes not disappearing, but it becomes weaker. And instead, our personal identity of who am I, what do I stand for, becomes stronger, which I think is a positive thing. And because the flip side of this, the positive side of this, is that we all start to looking at ourselves as being humans. Right? We start to look at similarities and finding people who are similar to us, regardless of where they are. And I think if you start looking at what's happening in a lot of countries, you can see that now people are have stronger, stronger opinions. Like, there's bigger conflict within countries now, right? Bill Gates said a very good observation. He said 20 years from now, there will be no rich countries and poor countries. There will be, right? But it doesn't mean there will not be rich and poor people. It will be bigger differences within countries and smaller differences between countries.
Yes.
So to have a mindset then where we define and divide the world based on countries, it's just an old-fashioned way of looking at the world.
So for you personally, if we talk about personal values and things that you are looking for and people you would like to connect with, like what would be the maybe top 3 core values that you're looking for in people when you even do work or you're choosing some connections?
But for me, because what I talk about and my job is to speak at global conferences, right? If there's a global conference, I'm the speaker because I know how to speak to a Chinese so that they laugh, and I also know how to speak to the American and the Turkish, right? So I can make a speech so that everyone laughs, everyone finds the interesting message, because I've built my speech to work on humans, not on Americans, not on Germans. So when I'm looking for people to work with, I look for people who have the same mindset. So my 3D developer sits in Australia. My branding consultant sits in France. My web developer is in India. The guy who runs my servers are in Ukraine. The guy who makes my print material, he's in Sweden. My accountant is in Singapore. What else do I have? I'm just brainstorming out of my top of my head. I just recently had a personal assistant based in the Philippines. So I don't care. It's not that I have to have. It has to be like they are spread out. It's just that they are, and because
you don't choose based on the countries, you
I
choose
just
based on
find
their qualities.
some
on the skills.
I like to work with, and because they are now so spread out, in my mindset, I just say, okay, who do I know who can make this for me, regardless where they are in the world? It's not that they have to be based in Ukraine. I found a guy in the Ukraine. He's super good at what he's doing, and he charges much less than if I would go to Singapore and do it. So why not do it? It's a mindset shift. Instead of saying, where can I find the best Swede? I say, where can I find the best person? Instead of saying, which American, if I was an American, which American person can I learn from? Or which American idea should I learn from? Say, which person or which idea can I be inspired by? It of course increases your creative capacity if you open up your mind like that. Doesn't mean you become less of an American or less of a German or less of a Russian. It becomes you become more as a human.
Thank you so much, Fredrik. That was actually a great line, more for human, and we would like to leave you with that today, guys. It's very important when you're building your own business. Do remember that we are going into the beautiful time when it is all about the global mindset and your ability to connect to humans' emotions and sell your brand globally, independent from the country you are based in. And of course, we always appreciate for you to share this video if you like it, and we're gonna go back to you next week with another amazing speaker.